In the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, where the old ridges roll like the spines of sleeping beasts and the mist coils low along the valleys like something alive, I spent the summer of 2017 in a cabin that belonged to my grandmother, an old wooden structure perched at the edge of a steep drop, facing an endless sea of pines. I had gone there to escape the noise of the city, to finish my research for a graduate project on Appalachian folklore, and because my grandmother, before she passed, warned me never to stay there alone for more than a week. "This mountain remembers things," she used to say in her cracking voice, "and some things remember you back." At the time, I dismissed her words as superstition, the kind of folklore I was studying, stories passed down from people who lived isolated, close to the land, close to the dark. But as soon as I arrived, something felt wrong. The air was too still, the trees too quiet, as if the entire forest was holding its breath. Even the birds refused to sing. The cabin smelled of cedar and old paper, filled with jars of herbs, bundles of dried flowers, and a few strange symbols carved into the wooden beams by my grandmother herself. She had always been spiritual, believing the mountain was alive, that the land had a soul and a memory. On the first night, as I unpacked, I heard footsteps on the gravel outside, slow, deliberate, crunching each stone with unnatural precision. Expecting a hiker, I opened the door, but no one was there. Not even tracks. Only a faint echo of breathing, deep and raspy, fading into the treeline. I shook it off, blaming nerves and exhaustion, and settled inside with my laptop and old folk journals. But as midnight stretched across the mountains, I felt it again. The sensation of being watched, not by one pair of eyes, but by many, as though the forest itself leaned closer. The next morning, I went into the nearest small town for groceries and mentioned the footsteps casually to an old local man sitting outside the general store. His expression turned grim immediately. "You're staying at the Whitlock cabin?" he asked, and when I nodded, he shook his head. "You city people never listen. Those woods aren't empty. They ain't been empty for 100 years. He wouldn't say more, only muttered something about shadows that roam the ridge and follow the living. I laughed it off again, but that night, I discovered the truth behind his warning. Around 2 a.m., while editing my notes, I began hearing the same footsteps circling the cabin, slow, heavy, dragging. But this time there were more than one. Multiple sets, crunching in an irregular rhythm. I peered out of the window and saw only darkness, so thick it felt like a solid wall. The footsteps stopped suddenly, replaced by whispering, hundreds of overlapping voices speaking in a language I had never heard, like wind forced through broken bones. Terrified, I grabbed my flashlight and opened the door, shining the beam across the yard. The trees swayed violently even though the air was perfectly still. The shadows between them moved, not with the wind, but with intention. Something darted behind a tree, a tall, thin silhouette, impossibly long arms, had tilted unnaturally to one side. When I aimed the flashlight at it, the light flickered and died instantly, as if swallowed. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and tried to rationalize what I saw, but logic crumbled with every creak of the cabin walls. The whispers seeped under the floorboards like smoke. I pushed a dresser in front of the door and stayed awake until dawn. The moment sunlight hit the trees, the forest returned to normal. Birds singing, branches still. As if nighttime transformed the mountain into something else entirely. Determined to understand what was happening, I dug into my grandmother's old journals. Most were filled with herbal recipes and folklore, but one leather-bound notebook, hidden beneath loose floorboards, contained detailed entries about the shadows of Black Hollow Ridge. According to her, these shadows were not ghosts, not creatures, but remnants, impressions of violent events soaked into the land and given form by the isolation and silence of the mountains. She described them as thin figures with empty faces, who wandered at night searching for warmth, for life, drawn especially to people who stayed alone. They were tied to a tragedy that took place in the early 1900s when a small mining community vanished overnight. No bodies ever recovered, only dark stains on the earth and stories of figures seen watching from the trees. My grandmother believed the land trapped their suffering, replaying it like an echo. She warned that if you stayed long enough, the shadows would begin mimicking you, learning your movements, slipping closer each night until they entered your home and stood over you while you slept. I wanted to leave immediately, but a storm rolled in that afternoon, blocking the narrow mountain road with fallen branches and mudslides. I was trapped. As night fell, fog poured down the ridge like a living thing, swallowing the cabin. I lit every candle I could find and sat in the living room clutching the journal, waiting. Around midnight, the temperature dropped so sharply, I could see my breath. The whispering began again, louder this time, rising from beneath the floor, from outside, from the walls themselves. Then I heard a soft knock on the window, 3 slow taps. When I looked, my heart froze. Staring back at me was my own reflection, but it wasn't me. It was a shadow version of me, taller, features stretched, eyes hollow pits. It tilted its head like the figure I had seen before, and when I stepped back, it mirrored the movement a second later, as if learning. More shapes accumulated behind it, thin, long-limbed, bending at impossible angles. The glass rattled as cold fingers traced along the surface. I backed away toward the bedroom, but as I crossed the hall, the front door handle began to turn slowly, deliberately, as though someone on the other side was testing it. The dresser I had pushed earlier scraped across the floor, as if something was pushing from outside. The candle flames stretched horizontally toward the door, drawn by an unseen force. The shadows whispered my name now, not perfectly, but close enough to freeze the blood in my veins. Irina. Irina. The lights flickered violently. The journal in my hands grew cold, the ink on the pages shifting like it was moving. I ran into the bedroom, locked the door, and hid in the closet, praying for the storm to pass, for dawn to come. But the shadows seeped under the door like liquid darkness, pooling on the floor before rising into tall shapes. One leaned its head inside the closet, inches from my face, its breath cold as winter stone. Its hand reached up, long, bony, fingers splitting into smaller tendrils, and touched my cheek, leaving a burning mark. I screamed, and the creature recoiled, not in fear but in excitement, as if my fear fed it. Behind it, more shadows crowded the room, their forms glitching like corrupted film frames. In a single desperate moment, I remembered something from my grandmother's journal. They draw strength from silence and fear. Break the silence. Break their hunger. So I began shouting, nonsense words at first, then my grandmother's prayers, then songs she used to hum while cooking. The shadows writhed, flickered, distorted. The more noise I made, the more they weakened. They swirled like smoke caught in wind, pulling back, shrinking into the cracks of the walls and floor. For the rest of the night, I sang until my throat burned. When the first light of dawn touched the cabin, the last shadow dissolved. The storm finally cleared, and I left the cabin without packing a single thing. I drove down the mountain shaking, my cheeks still burning where the creature touched me, a mark that would never fully fade. When I told the townspeople what happened, they didn't question or doubt me. Instead, they gave me the same warning my grandmother once did. The mountain keeps its memories. You were lucky it let you leave with yours. I never went back, but sometimes, late at night, I hear slow footsteps outside my apartment door, soft, deliberate, familiar, and a whisper that stretches my name wrong, as if something from the Appalachian Mountain Shadows followed me home.